The firelight danced against the darkness of the Cascade Mountains, painting shadows across Grayson Blake's face as 8 primitive figures closed in around him. Rope cut into his wrists where they'd bound him to the wooden post. Blood from the gash on his forehead had dried in a dark line down his temple. His $1,000 suit hung in tatters, shredded by branches in violence. The tribal leader stepped forward, bone necklace clicking with each movement. White ash paint covered his weathered face in ritualistic patterns. His eyes held no mercy. Shadow Beast follows white man. You bring death to our people. Dawn comes, you die. A spear tip lifted toward Grayson's throat, firelight gleaming on the sharpened stone point. Everything froze, from ice to fire. To understand how a tech CEO worth $500 million ended up fighting for his life in the wilderness, bound and bleeding before a tribe that wanted him dead, we have to go back 9 days. Back to when Grayson Blake thought he had everything figured out. Back to the morning when his carefully controlled world started falling apart at 35,000 feet. The Seattle skyline glittered through floor-to-ceiling windows as Grayson Blake strode into the Blake Technologies boardroom at precisely 8 o'clock Monday morning. 12 members of the board sat around the custom walnut table, coffee cooling in expensive china cups. Richard Hoffman, his father's oldest friend and the only board member who'd known Grayson since he was 17, glanced up with a slight nod. Grayson didn't return the gesture. Sentiment wasted time. He set his iPad on the table with a deliberate click. The screen projection flickered to life on the 80-inch display behind him. No greeting, no small talk. The quarterly numbers spoke louder than pleasantries ever could. Q3 revenue, $47 million, up 23% from Q2. Hoffman's approval registered in the slight relaxation of his shoulders. Good, one ally confirmed. The problem. Grayson advanced the slide. Competitor analysis graphs filled the screen, red trend lines cutting upward like warnings. Nextech is developing a parallel product. Their launch window is 6 months out. The tension in the room thickened. Several board members shifted in their seats. Grayson let them sit with the discomfort for exactly 5 seconds. Long enough to feel the threat, not long enough to spiral into panic. Solution: accelerate Phase 2 timeline. We launch 3 months ahead of their schedule. Additional cost, $2 million. First year ROI, $15 million minimum. Thomas Chen, the newest board member and the one most likely to challenge him, leaned forward. Risks? Quality metrics may drop 5%. First mover advantage compensates. The question isn't whether we should. The question is who has the courage to act while everyone else hesitates. The vote passed 11-1, 18 minutes total. Grayson was already packing his iPad when the others started reaching for their coffee cups, hoping to extend the meeting into networking. He was out the door before the first tentative conversation began. The elevator descended 40 floors in silence. Grayson studied his reflection in the polished steel doors. Same charcoal suit he'd worn for 5 years. Different fabric, identical cut. Same Rolex his father had given him the day he made junior partner at 25. Same leather iPad case, the one gift he'd kept after his father died 2 years ago. Work hard. Build something that lasts. His father's voice echoed in memory, but the words felt hollow now. Grayson had built something that lasted. Blake Technologies had grown from a struggling startup to a tech powerhouse under his leadership. 15 years of 80-hour weeks. 15 years of choosing the company over everything else. The result? A corner office with a view of Puget Sound and an apartment that felt like a hotel suite no matter how long he lived there. The elevator doors opened onto the executive parking level. His Tesla sat in its reserved spot, spotless in black. He sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine, pulling out his phone instead. The call connected on the second ring. "Grayson, how's my boy?" His father's voice. Except it wasn't. William Blake had been gone for 2 years. This was his stepfather, the man who'd raised him in Montana after his real parents died when he was 8. The man who'd taught him to hunt and track and survive in the Rockies. "Morning, Jack. Just checking in. You work too much. When are you coming out to visit? Mountains are beautiful this time of year." "Soon. I've got a client meeting in Portland today, but I'll fly out next week." "Bring that girl you keep not telling me about." Grayson's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "There's no girl, Jack. No time for that. Your real dad told me something once, right before he died. He said, make sure Grayson knows how to build a life, not just a company." The words landed like a punch. Grayson stared at the dashboard photo, himself at 16, standing next to Jack in the Montana Rockies, holding up his first successful bow hunt. Both of them grinning, covered in dirt, and entirely alive. "I'll call you next week, promise." He ended the call before Jack could push further. The Tesla's engine hummed to life, silent and electric. The drive to Blake Technologies headquarters took 12 minutes. Grayson spent them reviewing emails on his phone at every red light, approving 3 budget requests and denying 2 before he reached the parking garage. His assistant met him at the elevator with his usual coffee order and a tablet full of the day's schedule. Black coffee, no sugar. Same as every morning for 15 years. "Morning, Mr. Blake. Your 8:30 with the design team is ready." They're nervous. They should be. The Aurora mock-ups were subpar. Ms. Hayes worked all weekend to revise them. Sutton Hayes. The name triggered a flash of memory. 6 months ago, the all-hands meeting where he'd publicly eviscerated her design presentation in front of 200 employees. She'd gone pale, fingernails digging into her palms to keep from crying. Professional. Controlled. But he'd seen the hurt. It was necessary. Excellence demanded brutal honesty. Feelings were obstacles to progress. Except the memory had been surfacing more frequently lately, usually at 3 in the morning when the apartment felt particularly empty. Grayson pushed the thought aside. Sentiment was Victor Blake's greatest gift to him, or rather, the complete absence of it. His uncle had taken him in after Jack moved back to Montana, had molded him into the CEO Blake Technologies needed. Cold, calculating, ruthless when required. "It made you successful," Victor always said. "It made you strong." The design team presentation lasted exactly 15 minutes. Sutton Hayes stood at the front of the conference room, auburn hair pulled back severely, green eyes tracking his every reaction as she walked through the revised mock-ups. She'd worked 62 hours over the weekend. The metadata on the files told him that much. The design showed it. Clean, innovative, exactly what Aurora needed. Grayson studied the final screen for a full 30 seconds. The room held its breath. Navigation is clearer, hierarchy improved, color consistency maintained. Sutton's shoulders relaxed fractionally. But the call to action on page 3 lacks prominence. Users will miss the conversion point. Her jaw tightened. "If we make it more prominent, it conflicts with the minimalist aesthetic you requested in the brief. Then find balance. I've tried 9 versions. Try a 10th. Something flashed in her eyes. Frustration, anger, maybe both. Her voice stayed level, professional, but the edge was unmistakable. "With respect, Mr. Blake, perhaps the issue isn't the design. Perhaps the vision isn't being communicated effectively." The room went silent. Nobody challenged Grayson Blake, not in 15 years. He studied her for a long moment. Sutton Hayes met his gaze without flinching, chin slightly raised. Defiant, brave, foolish, interesting. That's an interesting perspective. Wrong, but interesting. He closed his iPad and stood. The meeting was over. But halfway to the door, he paused. "The designs are good, Miss Hayes. Better than good. Keep the minimalist aesthetic. We'll test both versions with users and let data decide." He left before he could see her reaction. But he felt it. Surprise, confusion, maybe a hint of satisfaction. It stayed with him through 3 more meetings, an investor call, and lunch at his desk. At 6:15, his assistant knocked on the office door. "Sir, your Portland flight is confirmed for tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock departure from Boeing Field. Captain Morrison will be ready." Grayson glanced at his calendar. The Davidson Industries pitch. Big client, bigger contract. He'd need the Aurora mock-ups uploaded to the cloud for the presentation. "Who's joining me?" "Ms. Hayes, sir. She uploaded the final files at 3 this morning." 3 in the morning. Sutton Hayes had been working when he'd been lying awake in his empty penthouse, staring at the ceiling and wondering why success felt so much like failure. "Confirmed. Make sure she has the flight details." The assistant hesitated at the door. "Sir, the spam filter flagged an unusual email this morning. It mentioned your Uncle Victor. The system thought it might be phishing, but..." "Delete it. It said something about knowing the truth about Victor Blake. I thought you should..." "I said delete it." The assistant left. Grayson returned to his computer, but concentration fractured. An email about Victor? His uncle had retired from the company 3 years ago, moved to a consultant role that kept him close enough to offer advice, but far enough to avoid daily operations. They had dinner once a month, conversations that felt more like performance reviews than family time. Victor Blake had taught him everything: how to negotiate, how to lead, how to build an empire, how to wall off emotion and focus on results. "Caring is weakness, Grayson. Leaders can't afford weakness." The words had been repeated so many times they'd become gospel. For 15 years, Grayson had lived by them. For 15 years, they'd made him successful. But lately, at 3 in the morning, they felt less like wisdom and more like prison bars. He shut down his computer and headed home. The penthouse apartment greeted him with silence and city lights. 52nd floor, panoramic views, 10,000 square feet of designer furniture, and no soul whatsoever. Grayson poured 2 fingers of Macallan 25 into a crystal tumbler engraved with his father's initials, W.B., William Blake. Jack wasn't his biological father, but William had been. Grayson barely remembered him, just fragments, strong hands teaching him to tie his shoes, laughter during camping trips, the smell of Old Spice cologne. Then the car accident. Black ice on I-90. Grayson was 8 years old. Jack had stepped in, raised him in Montana until he was 17. Then Victor had arrived, offering opportunity and mentorship and a future that didn't involve small-town life. "Come work for me. I'll teach you everything your father never could." And Victor had. He taught Grayson to be successful, powerful, respected. He'd forgotten to teach him how to be happy. Grayson drank the whiskey and went to bed. Sleep came hard and left early. By 5:30 he was awake, running 5 miles on the treadmill while his mind ran through the Portland presentation. At 7:40 his driver pulled up to Boeing Field's private terminal. The Gulfstream G550 sat on the tarmac, white and sleek with the Blake Technologies logo in blue on the tail. Captain James Morrison, 65 and gray-haired, stood by the boarding stairs with his usual friendly smile. "Morning, Mr. Blake. Beautiful day for flying. Weather's clear all the way to Portland." "Thank you, Captain." Sutton Hayes was already on board, seated on the right side of the cabin, laptop open. She wore a gray blazer and had her hair pulled back in a neat bun. Professional armor. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, 3 hours of sleep at most. Grayson took the seat across from her, maintaining the usual 6 feet of professional distance. The flight attendant offered coffee, black, no sugar, exactly as expected. The engines powered up at 8:12. Portland was 45 minutes away, plenty of time to review the presentation one final time, except Grayson couldn't focus. He kept noticing small details, the way Sutton's fingers flew across the keyboard, the small notebook beside her laptop, filled with sketches and handwritten notes, the coffee cup, cream and sugar, unlike his own preference. The plane lifted off smoothly. Seattle fell away beneath them, gray water and green islands shrinking into miniature. "Mr. Blake?" Sutton's voice cut through his distraction. About the design, do you want specific changes before the client meeting? Button hierarchy on page 3. The call to action needs more prominence without disrupting the minimalist aesthetic. That's what I've been trying to balance. If we make it more prominent, it conflicts with the clean lines you requested. Then the brief needs adjustment. She looked at him directly for the first time all morning. Green eyes, sharp and assessing. With respect, sir, maybe the issue isn't the design or the brief. Maybe it's that we haven't actually discussed what balance means to you specifically. Dangerous territory. Employees didn't question Grayson Blake's communication style, except Sutton Hayes apparently did. You think I don't communicate effectively? I think you know exactly what you want, but translating that vision into design requires dialogue, not directives. It was the most honest thing anyone had said to him in years, possibly ever. Grayson leaned back in his leather seat, studying her. Sutton met his gaze without flinching. Brave, foolish, both. Interesting perspective. Wrong, but interesting. Her mouth twitched, almost a smile. You said that yesterday. It's still accurate. Or maybe you just don't like being challenged. The flight attendant returned before Grayson could respond. Breakfast, Ms. Hayes? We have croissants, fruit, yogurt. Croissant, please. Grayson didn't look up from his iPad. Carbs spike insulin. Protein is more sustainable energy. Sutton's voice came back dry and pointed. Do you monitor everyone's breakfast choices? Just offering observation. Unsolicited observation. He glanced up. She was watching him with that direct gaze again, but now there was definitely amusement in it. Challenge. Spark. The corner of his mouth twitched before he could stop it. Almost a smile. Noted, Miss Hayes. Good. I'll eat my carbs in peace then. The exchange felt different than any conversation he'd had in months, maybe years. Not performance, not positioning, just human. It unsettled him more than it should have. Grayson returned to his iPad, reviewing the Aurora presentation slides, except he kept noticing the file names. Project_revamp_sh_final.pdf. The SH stood for Sutton Hayes. He'd seen these designs before. She'd submitted them 2 months ago. He'd rejected them as not good enough. Except now they were incorporated into the main presentation under the company's name. No credit to Sutton, just Blake Technologies' latest innovation. He'd stolen her work. The realization sat like lead in his stomach. This was standard practice. Employees created, the company owned. Legally sound. Ethically questionable. Sutton deserved credit. She'd worked 62 hours over the weekend, perfecting designs he'd previously dismissed. Grayson opened his mouth to say something. An acknowledgement, an apology, maybe just honesty. The plane shuddered. Light turbulence, nothing unusual. His coffee sloshed slightly in the cup. Sutton's laptop slid an inch across her tray table. Then the turbulence hit again, harder. The plane bucked violently. Sutton's laptop flew off the table, crashing to the floor with a sickening crack. Coffee sprayed across Grayson's suit. Captain Morrison's voice crackled over the intercom. Folks, we're experiencing some rough air. Please fasten your... The plane dropped. Not turbulence, free fall. Oxygen masks deployed from overhead, dangling like yellow threats. Warning alarms shrieked through the cabin. The floor tilted at an impossible angle. Grayson's stomach launched into his throat. Every instinct screamed. This wasn't normal. This was, Mayday, Mayday! Captain Morrison's voice, strained and desperate. Dual engine failure, losing altitude. The engine sound cut out completely. Silence. Deadly, impossible silence except for the screaming alarms. Then gravity stopped being theoretical. The world outside the window became a spinning blur of green and blue. Trees rushed up toward them. The cabin tilted 45 degrees. Overhead compartments burst open. Bags and jackets exploded into the air like shrapnel. Sutton screamed. Instinct overrode 15 years of emotional control. Grayson unbuckled, lurched across the aisle, grabbed her hand. Her fingers locked around his with desperate strength. "Look at me! Don't look outside!" Her eyes were wide, pure terror. Tears streamed down her face. In her gaze, Grayson saw his own fear reflected back. The mask was gone. The cold CEO had vanished. Just two people about to die. "We're going to be okay." The lie came automatic. "Look at me. Just look at me." The trees were so close now, individual branches visible through the window. The plane was screaming, metal stress, air resistance, everything coming apart. Grayson pulled Sutton against his chest, covering her body with his own. Protection, instinct, pointless, but necessary. "I'm sorry," the words came unbidden. "For everything, I'm sorry." Impact. The world exploded in sound and force. Metal shrieking, glass shattering, the percussion of violence that rewrote physics. A tree branch speared through the fuselage 6 inches from where Sutton's head had been seconds earlier. Grayson's head cracked against something hard. White light, then darkness. Silence came first. Not peaceful, oppressive, heavy silence that pressed down like physical weight. Grayson's head throbbed with each heartbeat. Something warm and wet ran down his face. Blood, probably. He tried to open his eyes. Vision swam, doubled, finally focused. The cabin was destroyed. Twisted metal, shattered glass, smoke drifting lazily through gaping holes in the fuselage. Seats ripped from their bolts. The smell, jet fuel, sharp and chemical, mixed with pine needles and earth. Alive. The thought came distant and strange. "I'm alive." "Sutton?" His voice came out hoarse, barely recognizable. A groan answered. She was slumped in her seat, held by the seatbelt, blood on her lip. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. Grayson tried to stand. Pain exploded through his left leg. He looked down. His pants were torn, soaked dark with blood. Deep laceration across his thigh, bleeding steadily. Not important. Move. He fumbled with his seatbelt. The buckle released. He half fell toward Sutton, legs screaming protest. She blinked at him. Grayson? First time she'd used his first name. It sounded foreign and intimate simultaneously. "I'm here. Are you hurt?" I don't know." A massive shape blocked her exit. The food service cart had broken free, pinned her against the cabin wall. Together they pushed. Adrenaline turned the impossible merely difficult. The cart shifted. Sutton slid free. "Captain Morrison!" Grayson called toward the cockpit. No answer. Sutton moved before he could stop her, crawling through debris toward the cockpit door. It hung open, twisted on broken hinges. She made a sound, small, wounded. Her hand flew to her mouth. Grayson dragged himself forward, leg protesting every movement. Captain Morrison slumped over the controls. His neck was bent wrong. Blood from his ears painted dark trails down his gray hair. The impact had been instant. No suffering. Small mercy. Grayson checked for pulse anyway. Nothing. Sutton turned away and vomited against the twisted metal of the cabin wall. He wanted to comfort her, to say something that would make the horror less. But what words existed for watching someone die? Grayson pulled off his suit jacket, torn but still functional, and offered it to her. She took it without speaking, wiping her mouth with shaking hands. "We need to assess the situation." His CEO voice kicked in automatically. Crisis management, problem solving, emotion could wait, except his hands were shaking too. They moved through the wreckage methodically. The emergency beacon was crushed, circuit board visible through cracked plastic. Both their phones, no signal this deep in the mountains. The first aid kit had survived, still strapped under a seat. Grayson pulled it free. Sutton's hands, steadier now, opened the kit. She worked with surprising competence, cleaning his leg wound with bottled water, applying gauze, wrapping it tight with elastic bandage. Her fingers were gentle, but efficient. "Girl Scouts," she said when she caught him watching. "And my grandmother taught me. She was an Appalachian herbalist, believed in being prepared for anything. Smart woman. Strongest person I ever knew. She died 2 years ago." Shared loss flickered between them. Grayson's father, her grandmother, people who'd taught them to survive. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it. Sutton met his eyes. Something shifted in her expression. Surprise, maybe recognition, like she was seeing him for the first time. "Thank you." They completed the inventory in silence. Water, 2 bottles, 1 liter total. Food, minibar snacks, maybe 2 days' worth. Supplies, 1 flare gun with a single flare, rope, scattered metal debris that might prove useful. Shelter, the wrecked cabin, unstable but better than nothing. The sun was already sinking toward the tree line, temperature dropping. They were somewhere in the Cascade Mountains, but where exactly? Without the beacon, rescue couldn't pinpoint their location. Sutton voiced what Grayson was thinking. "We should stay here. Search and rescue will find the crash site." "The beacon's destroyed. They don't know where we are. We need higher ground. Build a signal fire they can see from the air." "You can barely walk. That leg wound, if it gets infected..." Grayson pushed himself upright. His leg buckled immediately. He grabbed a twisted seat frame to stay standing. Sutton was right. He hated it. "Fine. We stay tonight. Reassess tomorrow morning." Agreed. Partners, not boss and employee. The wilderness had rewritten their dynamic in a single afternoon. As dusk fell, the temperature plummeted. Grayson tried to start a fire using the battery from his destroyed phone and wire stripped from the cabin. Sparks, but no ignition. 15 minutes of trying produced nothing but frustration. Sutton knelt beside him. "Let me try." "You know how to make fire?" "Bow drill method. My grandmother taught me every summer in the Appalachian Mountains." She gathered materials with practiced efficiency. Dry stick, flat piece of bark, rope from the emergency kit. Her hands assembled the bow drill like she'd done it 1,000 times. The motion was hypnotic. Steady rhythm, focused concentration. 5 minutes produced thin smoke. 10 minutes created a glowing ember. Sutton leaned down, blowing gently, and flame flickered to life. Grayson stared. This woman he'd dismissed, whose work he'd criticized and stolen, had just solved the problem that defeated him. "How?" "My grandmother had a saying, 'The mountain provides for those who listen.'" Sutton fed the small flame carefully, building it larger. "She taught me to pay attention, to learn from the land." "I wish I'd learned more from my father before he died." The words escaped before Grayson could catch them. Vulnerability, admission, things he never allowed. But Sutton just nodded. "What did he teach you?" "To work hard, build something that lasts, protect people weaker than yourself." "Good lessons. I forgot the last one somewhere along the way." Sutton looked at him across the growing fire. Shadows played across her face, softening the professional armor. "Maybe you're remembering now." Night fell completely. The forest became alive with sounds. Rustling, distant calls, the whisper of wind through enormous trees. Every noise felt threatening. Sutton shivered despite the fire. Grayson noticed immediately. "You're cold." "I'm fine." He shrugged off his torn suit jacket and offered it to her. She hesitated. "You'll freeze without it." "I run warmer than you. Basic physiology." It was the same tone he used in board meetings, stating facts, not opinions, but softer somehow. Sutton took the jacket, pulling it around her shoulders. "Thank you," she smiled. Small, genuine, transforming her face entirely. Something shifted in Grayson's chest. Warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. Dangerous, inappropriate, completely undeniable. He looked away, feeding more wood to the flames. They took turns sleeping. Grayson insisted on first watch, despite the leg injury. Sutton argued, then gave up when she realized his stubbornness matched her own. She fell asleep quickly, exhausted. Grayson sat with the makeshift spear they'd fashioned from metal debris, watching the darkness beyond the firelight. His hand drifted to his jacket pocket. Paper crinkled. He pulled it out carefully. An envelope. His father's handwriting. For Grayson, read when you find someone worth fighting for. Jack had given it to him 2 years ago, right after William Blake's funeral. Grayson had never opened it, never found the right moment, never found someone worth fighting for. He tucked it back into the pocket unopened. Not yet, not while everything was uncertain. At midnight, he woke Sutton for her watch. She sat up, blinking sleep from her eyes. Anything? Quiet. Some coyotes in the distance, nothing close. Get some rest, Grayson tried, but his mind wouldn't shut down. The crash replayed in fragments. Captain Morrison's body, the moment he'd grabbed Sutton's hand. The terror in her eyes that mirrored his own. 30 minutes later, Sutton's voice came soft across the fire. You can't sleep either? Too much adrenaline. Tell me about your father, not the lessons, the memories. Grayson didn't talk about his father, didn't talk about feelings or memories or anything that couldn't be quantified in a spreadsheet, but the darkness made honesty easier. He took me hunting every fall, Montana Rockies, just the two of us for 2 weeks. He taught me tracking, fire building, shelter construction. Used to say, the world can take everything from you, money, status, position, but skills, those are yours forever. Wise man. Best man I knew. When he died 2 years ago, I lost my compass. You're finding it again. Sutton's voice carried quiet certainty. Out here. Maybe she was right. Maybe stripping away the office, the title, the empire, maybe that revealed who Grayson actually was underneath. He wasn't sure he liked what he was finding. Too much fear, too much weakness, too much feeling. But looking at Sutton across the fire, seeing her strength despite exhaustion, her competence despite terror, maybe weakness wasn't the right word. Maybe it was just being human. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like relief. Dawn came cold and gray. They woke stiff and sore. Inventory even more depressing in daylight. Half the water gone. 1 energy bar each for breakfast. Grayson's leg throbbed despite the bandage. They needed water, food, better shelter, a plan. There should be a stream downhill. Grayson oriented by the sun, memories of his father's lessons surfacing. Water flows to lowest points. They moved slowly, Sutton supporting his weight. The forest was dense, towering Douglas firs blocking most sunlight. Beautiful and utterly indifferent to whether they lived or died. The stream appeared after 20 minutes of careful hiking. Clear water over smooth stones. Perfect, except Sutton stopped dead, hand flying to her mouth. Grayson followed her gaze down. Skull. Human. Ancient and yellowed, half buried in moss and earth. He knelt despite the leg pain, examining it with forced calm. 50 years old minimum, maybe more. They searched the immediate area. 4 more skulls, rib cages, femurs scattered like discarded tools. But the arrangement was too deliberate, too purposeful. Lost hikers? Sutton whispered. Maybe, but look at the placement. Their position, not scattered randomly. Someone arranged them. The chill that ran down his spine had nothing to do with temperature. A branch snapped somewhere behind them. Heavy, deliberate. Grayson grabbed Sutton's arm. Don't move. Rustling in the dense undergrowth. 20 yards away, too big for a deer. Then, drums. Faint but unmistakable. Rhythmic beating that didn't belong in wilderness. Back away, slowly. They retreated step by careful step. The drumming grew louder, closer. What is that? Sutton's voice trembled. Don't know. Don't want to find out. They reached their makeshift camp at a near run, despite Grayson's injury. The wrecked plane suddenly felt like sanctuary, but the drumming echoed through the forest for hours afterward. Distant, watching, waiting. That night, Grayson took first watch again. The fire burned bright, their only defense against whatever moved in the darkness. At 10:30, a sound cut through the normal forest noise. Low, guttural, definitely not human. Grayson's hand tightened on the metal spear. Yellow eyes appeared in the darkness, 30 feet away, reflecting firelight like twin coins. The mountain lion stepped into view, massive, easily 150 pounds of muscle and claw, tawny fur, ears flattened, tail twitching with predatory focus. Sutton woke instantly. "Grayson, don't move." His voice came steady despite the terror flooding his veins. "Stay absolutely still." He stood slowly, ignoring the screaming pain in his leg, grabbed a burning branch from the fire, positioned himself between Sutton and the cougar. "If I say run, you run. Promise me." "I'm not leaving. Promise me." The cougar's muscles coiled, preparing to spring. Grayson waved the torch, making himself larger. "Get back!" The cat snarled, a sound that vibrated through his bones. Everything he was, CEO, leader, builder of empires, meant nothing. This was primal. Predator and prey, life and death. The cougar lunged. Grayson swung the burning branch. Flames missed by inches. The cat landed, pivoted with impossible grace. Second lunge, faster. Grayson threw the torch directly at the cougar's face. It connected, fur singed. The cat roared in pain and fury, retreated 10 feet, pacing, calculating. Grayson grabbed another branch, held it like a weapon. His voice came from somewhere deep and ancient, not the boardroom, but the mountains his father had shown him. "Back! Go, now!" Raw, primal, absolutely certain. The standoff lasted 15 seconds that felt like hours. Then the cougar flicked its tail once and melted into darkness. Gone. Grayson's legs gave out. He collapsed to his knees. The adrenaline crash hit like a physical blow, shaking, gasping, unable to control the tremors running through his body. Sutton was there instantly, arms around him, holding him together while he fell apart. "I've got you. You're safe. I've got you." He'd faced down a predator, protected her through pure will and desperation, and now he was shaking in her arms like a child. "I haven't been scared like that since," the words caught in his throat, "since my parents died. I'd forgotten what real fear feels like." Sutton held him tighter. "You were incredible. You saved us both. Just instinct." "No." She pulled back, making him meet her eyes. Green and fierce and completely certain. "You chose to protect me. That wasn't instinct, that was character." The words landed somewhere deep. Character. Not competence or strategy or calculated risk. Just being human in the moment that mattered most. "I need to sleep," Grayson said, "but I can't turn it off." Sutton hesitated for just a moment, then she took his hand. Grayson froze. Her fingers were warm, calloused from work, strong despite their size. "I'm right here. Nothing's going to hurt you. If anything comes, I'll wake you immediately. You don't know how to." "I know how to feed a fire. I know how to scream very loudly. That's enough." He looked at their joined hands. Contact he hadn't allowed himself in years. Vulnerability he'd trained himself to eliminate. "Why are you doing this?" Sutton's answer came simple and devastating. "Because you do the same for me." Truth. Undeniable truth. Grayson's fingers curled around hers, holding on, trusting. 2 hours, then wake me for your shift. Deal. He lay down by the fire, Sutton's hands still firmly gripping his. And for the first time in 25 years, Grayson Blake let someone else keep watch while he slept. Dawn broke with Grayson still holding Sutton's hand. He woke, disoriented, the contact so foreign it took a moment to remember why their fingers were intertwined. She'd fallen asleep sitting against a log, head tilted at an angle that would leave her neck screaming. He studied her face in the weak morning light. Dirt smudged her cheek. Auburn hair had escaped its professional bun entirely, falling in tangled waves around her shoulders. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Beautiful. The thought arrived unbidden and unwelcome. This was Sutton Hayes, his employee, the woman whose work he'd criticized publicly, whose credit he'd stolen. This was survival proximity, nothing more. Except his thumb was moving in small circles against her palm, and he couldn't remember starting the motion. Grayson pulled his hand away carefully. Sutton stirred, eyes fluttering open. "Morning." Her voice came rough with sleep. Something about the unguarded softness made his chest tighten. "You stayed awake the entire watch." "Promised I would." "Most people break promises when it's inconvenient." Sutton sat up straighter, wincing as her neck protested. "I'm not most people, Mr. Blake." The formality jarred after holding hands through the night, after facing death together, after everything. "Grayson. Out here, just Grayson." She met his eyes, something shifting in her expression. Recognition, maybe, or permission. "Okay, Grayson." His name and her voice sounded different than it ever had in the boardroom. Warmer, real. Breakfast consisted of one energy bar split between them and water they'd boiled in a salvaged metal cup. Grayson's leg had stiffened overnight, the wound angry red at the edges. Infection was becoming a real concern. "We need protein," he said, trying to stand. His leg buckled immediately. "I'll hunt. There should be squirrels, maybe rabbits. With that leg, you can barely stand." "I can manage. Be practical." Sutton's tone carried the same edge she'd used challenging him about the design brief. Direct, unafraid. "You're the strategist. What would you tell an employee who insisted on working through an injury?" Grayson opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. She was right. Leadership meant delegating, not martyrdom. "Fine, what do you suggest?" Sutton pulled out her blue notebook, somehow still intact despite the crash. Inside, detailed plant sketches covered page after page, accompanied by handwritten notes in careful script. "My grandmother taught me to identify edible plants. We spent every summer hiking the Appalachian trails, learning what the mountains offered." She flipped through pages. "Wild blackberries should be finishing their season. Ramps, wild leeks, grow in shaded areas. Fiddlehead ferns are edible when boiled properly. You can identify all of these safely?" "I've been doing it since I was 6 years old." Another layer revealed. Sutton Hayes wasn't just a talented designer. She was a survivor in ways that had nothing to do with corporate politics. She returned 30 minutes later with a handful of berries, several wild onion-like plants, and young fern fronds. The meal wouldn't win culinary awards, but it was food their bodies desperately needed. Grayson ate slowly, watching her work. She moved with quiet competence, building up the fire, boiling water, preparing the ferns with practiced efficiency. "Your grandmother sounds remarkable." "She was the strongest person I ever knew. Raised my mother alone after my grandfather died young. Taught me everything about resilience." Sutton's voice softened. "She died 2 years ago, cancer, the same time frame as his father's death. Both of them carrying loss, building walls against the pain." "I'm sorry I never told you about the public criticism." The words emerged before Grayson could calculate their impact. 6 months ago, the design presentation. Sutton's hands stilled over the ferns. "I was excessively harsh, deliberately so." "Why?" Honesty felt dangerous, necessary. "Because your work threatened me. You're talented, innovative, everything the company needs. And I couldn't admit that someone else might be better at something than I was." Sutton turned to face him fully. Her green eyes searched his face, looking for deception or manipulation, finding only raw truth. "That's surprisingly honest. The wilderness doesn't allow for corporate games." "No," she agreed quietly. It doesn't. She extended her hand across the fire. Truce? Equal partners out here? Grayson took it. Her grip was firm, callous from work and survival. Equal partners. The handshake lasted a moment longer than professional. Neither of them pulled away first. They spent the morning improving their shelter, working side by side. Grayson designed a more stable lean-to structure, his engineering background surfacing. Sutton gathered broad leaves that her grandmother had taught her could repel water, layering them like primitive shingles. "Pass me the cordage," Grayson said, gesturing to the rope. It's called rope. Cordage refers specifically to twisted natural fibers, while rope can be, "You're such an engineer." He glanced at her. She was grinning, genuine amusement lighting her features. "That's not an insult in my world." "I know. It's kind of endearing, actually." Endearing. When was the last time anyone had described Grayson Blake as endearing? Never, probably. He tried tying a complex knot to secure the shelter's corner, failed twice. Sutton watched his third attempt with poorly concealed amusement. "Need help?" "I've got it." The knot collapsed again. Sutton knelt beside him, her shoulder brushing his. "Girl Scouts taught practical skills, remember? Here." Her hands guided his through the proper sequence. Loop, twist, pull through. The knot held perfectly. "You were Eagle Scout, weren't you?" she asked. "I can tell by the way you approach problems." "How did you know?" "You have that 'I was definitely patrol leader' energy." Grayson laughed. Actual, genuine laughter that felt rusty from disuse. "Guilty? How am I that predictable?" "You're not predictable, you're just very committed to doing things right." Something in her tone suggested she didn't find that quality annoying anymore. By afternoon, they'd created a functional shelter and established a water filtration system using charcoal from their fire, sand, and cloth strips. They worked in comfortable silence, punctuated by occasional conversation, discovering a rhythm that felt natural. The intimacy of survival was dismantling barriers faster than months of office interaction ever could. As dusk approached, Sutton disappeared into the forest with her notebook. Grayson waited, leg elevated, watching the tree line with growing concern. 15 minutes became 30, 45. She emerged carrying plants he didn't recognize. Roots, leaves, chunks of what looked like tree resin. "Your leg is infected." "Not a question. I can see the red streaks from here." Grayson looked down. She was right. The inflammation had spread, angry lines radiating from the wound. "We don't have antibiotics." "No, but we have alternatives." Sutton knelt beside him, arranging her findings with care. Golden seal root has natural antibacterial properties. Yarrow stops bleeding and fights infection. Pine resin prevents bacterial growth. "Your grandmother taught you all this?" "She used these remedies her entire life. Appalachian herbalism goes back generations." Sutton cleaned the wound with boiled water. Grayson gritted his teeth against the pain. She crushed the golden seal root between two rocks, creating a paste, then mixed in yarrow leaves she chewed to break down. "This is going to hurt worse before it helps." "I understand." She applied the paste directly to the wound. Burning pain exploded through Grayson's leg, worse than the initial injury. He gasped, vision graying at the edges. Sutton's eyes filled with tears, even as her hands continued working. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Don't." He forced the words through clenched teeth. "Don't apologize for saving my life." She finished quickly, rebandaging with clean cloth strips. Then she stayed kneeling beside him, one hand resting on his shoulder until the worst pain subsided. "Thank you," Grayson managed when he could speak normally again. "For the third or fourth time, thank you for saving me." "We save each other, that's the deal." Her hand was still on his shoulder. The contact felt grounding, necessary. 2 hours later, the fever that had been building broke. The red streaks began fading. Sutton's remedy was working. She fell asleep against his side, exhausted from worry and work. Grayson let her stay there, one arm curving around her shoulders naturally. His jacket pocket crinkled. The letter from his father, still unread. Soon, maybe, when he understood what it might mean. Night fell. Grayson kept watch, Sutton warm against him, and felt something shifting in his carefully controlled world. Day 4 dawned warmer. Grayson's legs showed real improvement. Sutton's treatment had pulled him back from the edge of serious infection. They ate breakfast in companionable silence, rationing their dwindling supplies. "We need a real plan," Sutton said. "Waiting for rescue isn't working. The beacon's destroyed, and we haven't heard any search aircraft." "Agreed. We head for the highest peak we can reach. Build a signal fire large enough to see from the air. Can you climb with that leg?" "If you help me, always." The word carried weight beyond its simple meaning. They packed what little they could carry: water, the flare gun, materials for fire starting. Left a note at the crash site carved into metal with a sharp rock, just in case rescue found the plane first. The hike started gradually, following what might have been an old game trail, but within an hour, the terrain steepened dramatically. Grayson leaned heavily on Sutton, his leg protesting every step. They stopped frequently. During one rest, Sutton pulled out her notebook. "Tell me something about your childhood, something happy." "Why?" "Because we both need reminding that life wasn't always this hard." Grayson thought back through years of boardrooms and bottom lines. "My father, Jack, the man who raised me in Montana, took me hunting every fall. Just the two of us, 2 weeks in the Rockies." "What did he teach you?" "Everything practical: fire, shelter, tracking, water sourcing, but also—" Grayson paused, surprised by the memory surfacing. "He used to say the world could take everything material from you, but skills and character were yours forever. That knowledge couldn't be repossessed." Wise man. I forgot that lesson somewhere. Started measuring life by what I owned rather than who I was. Sutton bumped her shoulder against his. "You're remembering now." Were those his father's lessons returning, or was Sutton teaching him something new? Maybe both. They reached a stream crossing at midday. Clear water rushed over smooth stones, beautiful and cold. Grayson knelt to refill their bottle. Sutton froze beside him. He followed her gaze. Pressed into the soft mud at the water's edge were tracks, large with deep claw marks extending from each pad. Mountain lion. Fresh. "How recent?" Sutton whispered. Grayson touched the edge carefully. The mud was still damp, not yet dried by afternoon sun. "Within the hour, maybe less." They filled the bottle in tense silence and moved away from the stream quickly. The cat was hunting them, or at least aware of their presence. Predators didn't forget easy prey. That night they built the fire larger than necessary, flames reaching high. Neither mentioned the tracks, but both understood the stakes had risen. Grayson took first watch again. Sutton fell asleep quickly, exhaustion overwhelming fear. At 2 in the morning she woke and joined him by the fire without being called. "Can't sleep," she explained, sitting close enough that their shoulders touched. "Too much adrenaline? Too much thinking." They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars wheel overhead through the gaps in the forest canopy. The Milky Way painted silver across black, more stars than Grayson had seen since his last Montana visit years ago. "It's beautiful," Sutton breathed. "Yes," but Grayson was looking at her profile painted in firelight, not the sky. She turned, caught him staring. Their eyes held. The moment stretched, charged with possibility. Then Sutton yawned, breaking the tension naturally. "I should try to sleep." "Good idea," but she didn't move away. Just shifted slightly, head coming to rest on his shoulder. "This okay?" Grayson's arm curved around her automatically. "Yeah, this is okay." She was asleep within minutes. He stayed awake through his watch and hers, unwilling to disturb her rest. Dawn found them still pressed together. Fire burned to embers, both finally sleeping. Day 5 broke gray and threatening. Storm clouds massed on the horizon, dark and ominous. They pushed hard for the summit, racing the weather. The peak came into view around 3 in the afternoon, a rocky outcrop offering 360-degree views of the valley below, perfect for a signal fire. They gathered deadwood frantically. Pine burned hot and fast. The smoke would be visible for miles. Grayson arranged rocks to create a reflector that would amplify light and heat. Sutton prepared tinder and kindling with practiced efficiency. Working together, they built a structure that would burn bright and long once lit. Then they waited. The first drops of rain arrived at 7. Within minutes, it became a deluge. Their signal fire, unlit, remained ready but useless in the downpour. They huddled under an emergency blanket salvaged from the plane, but it offered minimal protection. Water soaked through their clothes within minutes. Temperature dropped 20 degrees. Hypothermia became a real threat. "We need to share body heat." Grayson pulled Sutton close, wrapping his arms around her. "This is medical necessity, not—" "I know, it's okay." She pressed against his chest, shivering violently. He held her tighter, trying to transfer warmth through sheer will. Hours passed. The rain continued relentlessly. They were beyond cold, entering the dangerous zone where thinking slowed and confusion set in. Grayson talked to keep them both alert. Memories of Montana summers, his father's lessons, the day he started Blake Technologies with nothing but an idea and borrowed capital. "You built it from nothing?" Sutton's teeth chattered between words. "From negative nothing. I had $40,000 in student loans and a dream that everyone said was impossible. But you proved them wrong. I worked 90-hour weeks for 5 years, slept under my desk more than in my apartment, sacrificed everything for success. Was it worth it?" The question hung in the storm. Grayson thought about his empty penthouse, his methodically scheduled life, the loneliness that had become background noise. "I thought so, until 9 days ago." Sutton tilted her face up toward his. Rain streaked down her cheeks like tears. "What changed?" "I remembered what being human feels like, what connection costs, and what it's worth." The words were too honest, too raw, but the storm and cold stripped away pretense. "Grayson, I need to tell you something. I love you." The confession exploded out before he could calculate consequences or measure risks. 3 words that violated every rule he'd built his life around. Sutton went completely still in his arms. "What?" "I love you, Sutton. I've known since you ran into a mountain lion's den to save a man who treated you terribly for 3 years. Maybe I knew before that and was too controlled to admit it. You can't. We're just trauma bonding. It's not real, it's real." Grayson's arms tightened around her. "For me, this is absolutely real." He cupped her face with one hand, thumb brushing water from her cheekbone. "You're the smartest, bravest, most capable person I've ever known. And if we don't make it out of these mountains, I needed you to understand that." Sutton stared at him. Rain pounded down. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Then she kissed him. Desperate, honest, fierce. Her hands fisted in his wet shirt, pulling him closer. He kissed her back with 15 years of repressed emotion, tasting rain and need and something that felt like coming home. They broke apart, gasping. "I love you too," Sutton's voice shook. "And it terrifies me more than the mountain lion did." "Me too. Terrifies me too." They held each other as the storm raged, sharing breath and warmth and truth. Morning came gray and cold. The rain had stopped, leaving everything soaked and miserable. But Grayson woke with Sutton in his arms, and somehow that made the discomfort bearable. She stirred, eyes opening slowly. Their faces were inches apart. "Morning," she whispered. "Morning." Neither moved. The intimacy felt too precious to break. Finally, necessity drove them apart. The signal firewood was drenched, useless for at least a day. They needed to find shelter, regroup, and try again. The descent back toward the crash site took most of the day. Grayson's leg had worsened in the cold and wet, slowing their pace to a crawl. They were half a mile from camp when Grayson stepped wrong. His foot came down on nothing. Hidden snare trap, primitive but effective. Rope yanked his ankle upward with violent force. The world inverted. He hung 15 feet in the air, suspended upside down, blood rushing to his head. "Sutton, run!" Drumming erupted from every direction, not random, coordinated, surrounding them. 8 figures materialized from the forest like ghosts, faces painted bone-white with ash, crude spears with stone points, animal pelts. They moved with the confidence of people in their own territory. The leader stepped forward, old, scarred, a necklace of small bones clicking with each movement. His eyes held ancient knowledge in zero mercy. He spoke broken English, each word deliberate. "White woman, come with us." "Don't touch her!" Grayson struggled against the rope, achieving nothing. A warrior jabbed a spear toward him, warning clear. The leader addressed Sutton again, almost gentle. "You come, no hurt. You fight, he dies." Sutton looked at Grayson, terror, an impossible choice, warring in her expression. Grayson shook his head frantically. "Run! Hide! Save yourself!" But Sutton stepped forward toward the warriors. "I'll come. Don't hurt him. Please don't hurt him." "No!" Grayson thrashed violently. "Sutton, no!" A warrior cut the rope. Grayson crashed to the ground, impact driving air from his lungs. Before he could move, rough hands bound his wrists with plant fiber cordage. They marched through dense forest, single file. Sutton in front, hands tied. Grayson behind, blood from rope burns staining his wrists. Neither spoke. The warriors discouraged conversation with spear jabs. 30 minutes brought them to a clearing. A village spread before them, 20 structures with thatched roofs, organized around a central fire pit. Women and children stopped their activities to stare. Dogs barked warnings. The leader dragged Grayson to a thick post in the village center and bound him there with efficient brutality. Sutton was pushed into a small hut, a guard posted outside. Grayson tested the bonds. Too tight, professionally done. He wasn't escaping without help. The tribal leader approached as dusk fell. Up close, the man's face showed decades of weathering, and his eyes held intelligence that formal education couldn't measure. "Shadow beast follows white man. I don't understand." The leader gestured to a fresh burial mound at the village edge. "Black ghost, killer spirit, 3 moons past, tear apart our strongest hunter." He touched his bone necklace. Each piece, Grayson realized with sick certainty, was human fingerbone, trophies or warnings. "Now Shadow Beast returns, follows you. You bring death curse to our people." "I didn't bring anything." "Dawn comes, you die. Appease spirit, maybe Shadow Beast leaves after." The leader walked away. Discussion over. Judgment passed. Grayson slumped against the post. Execution at dawn. Maybe 6 hours to live. Through a gap in Sutton's prison hut, he could see her watching. Their eyes met across the village. Even from this distance, he read her expression. She wasn't giving up. Neither would he. Night fell completely. The village settled into routine. Cooking fires, children called inside, guards rotating on schedule. Grayson observed everything, cataloging patterns. Guard changes happened every 4 hours, clockwork regular. The northeast corner of the village had thick forest coverage and no torches. Blind spot. If Sutton could escape, he watched her hut. The guard's head nodded, once, twice, fighting sleep. At 11, Sutton slipped out, silent as smoke, navigated the blind spot perfectly, into the forest. Gone. Relief and terror flooded through Grayson in equal measure. She was free. She was alone in darkness with the mountain lion hunting, and no weapons, and he forced the spiral to stop. Sutton was capable, smart, resourceful. She would survive. But would he? Hours crawled past. Grayson's arms went numb from the binding position. His leg throbbed where infection threatened to return. The village slept around him, dogs occasionally barking at nothing. At 2 in the morning he heard it. distant, unmistakable, a mountain lion's roar of fury. Then, chaos erupting from the forest. Sutton burst into the village clearing at full sprint, screaming at the top of her lungs. 2 seconds behind her, the massive cougar exploded from the trees. The village detonated into panic. People scattered in every direction, screaming. Warriors grabbed spears but hesitated. This was the sacred shadow beast. Killing it might bring worse curse. The cougar stood in the firelight, confused by noise and flames, snarling at everything that moved. Perfect distraction. Sutton sprinted directly to Grayson through the chaos. Her hands tore at his bindings, fingers slick with blood from her own rope burns. "You're insane!" Grayson's voice mixed laughter with terror. "Shut up and hold still." The knots resisted. She pulled a sharp stone from her pocket. Where had she gotten that? And sawed frantically. The cougar's attention swung toward them. Yellow eyes locked on movement. It started forward. Sutton, almost. One final strand parted. Grayson yanked his hands free. "Run!" They sprinted. The cougar gave chase. Warriors chased the cougar. Complete pandemonium. Into the forest at full speed despite Grayson's legs screaming protest. Branches whipped their faces. Roots grabbed at their feet. Behind them, roars and shouts faded with distance. They ran until lungs burned, until muscles turned to liquid, until neither could take another step. Collapsed together in a small ravine, gasping for air. For 30 seconds, neither could speak. Then Grayson started laughing. Real, full, uncontrolled laughter. "You lured a mountain lion. To save me. You're completely insane." Sutton laughed too, the sound bordering on hysteria. "It seemed like a good idea at the time. How did you even—" "Followed its tracks, found the den, threw rocks at it until it chased me." "You threw rocks at a mountain lion." "I was desperate." Grayson pulled her against him, holding tight. "You're the bravest person I've ever met. Also the craziest, but mostly brave." Sutton's arms went around his neck. "We're alive. That's what matters." They sat in the ravine, holding each other, alive against all odds. Eventually, survival instinct reasserted itself. They needed distance from both the tribe and the confused cougar. Needed shelter. Needed rest. They stumbled through darkness until finding a small cave, more overhang than true cave, but defensible. No fire risk with the tribe searching, but they had each other for warmth. Huddled together in the darkness, Sutton finally spoke. "Grayson, at the office you stole credit for my designs. Not a question, statement of fact." "I know. I saw the file that morning before the crash." He could lie, deflect, minimize. The wilderness had stripped away those options. "Yes, I took your work and presented it as the company's innovation. No attribution. It was wrong." "Why?" "Because giving you credit meant admitting you were better than me at something, and I couldn't handle that truth." Sutton was quiet for a long moment. "Thank you for being honest. Out here, we can't afford anything else." She shifted in his arms. "In the office, I hated you. 3 years of criticism and coldness and feeling invisible. I built my entire professional identity around surviving your indifference." "I'm sorry. Let me finish. I hated who you were at Blake Technologies. But the man who fought a mountain lion to protect me, the man who's been vulnerable and real and honest these past days, I don't hate him at all." Grayson's throat tightened. "That man was always there, just buried under armor I built to survive. Uncle Victor's armor." The name dropped like a stone between them. "He taught me emotion equals weakness after my parents died. I was 17, grieving, lost. He offered structure and success in exchange for shutting down feeling." "That's abuse, Grayson, not mentorship." The word landed hard. Abuse. Grayson had never labeled it that way. But reframing 25 years through that lens, everything looked different. "He made me successful. He made you isolated. There's a difference." Sutton's hand found his in the darkness, squeezed gently. Out here, you're becoming who you were always meant to be. Strong but kind. Competent but vulnerable. Human. Grayson pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair. She smelled like wood smoke and pine and something uniquely her. I don't want to go back to who I was before. Then don't. Choose differently. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple, and that hard. They held each other as exhaustion finally claimed them both. Morning came with helicopter sounds, distant, unmistakable. The rhythmic thump of rotors cutting through mountain air. Both Grayson and Sutton scrambled from the cave, staring at empty sky. The sound faded, moving away. No! Sutton's scream tore from her chest. We're here! Here! But the helicopter was already gone, searching a different grid section. Grayson grabbed her shoulders. The signal fire. We need to get back to the peak. That's hours away. They might not come back. Then we make them see us, one way or another. They climbed. Grayson's leg was beyond pain, functioning on adrenaline and desperate hope. Sutton supported most of his weight, her own strength flagging. The summit appeared through morning mist. Their signal fire waited, wood dried by yesterday's sun. Grayson pulled out the single flare from his pocket, salvaged from the plane, carried through everything. One shot. If this doesn't work, Sutton took his hand. It'll work. It has to. The helicopter sound returned, closer this time, but still distant. Grayson lit the signal fire with shaking hands. Flames caught, spread, roared to life. Smoke billowed upward in a thick column. But the helicopter was moving away again, search pattern taking it to the next grid. The flare, Sutton urged. Now! Grayson aimed skyward, pulled the trigger. The flare arced upward in brilliant red, a small sun against gray morning. At its peak, it exploded into brilliant crimson fire that burned against the clouds. The helicopter sound changed, engine notes shifting, coming back, banking hard, heading directly toward them. They saw it, Sutton screamed, jumping and waving frantically. The helicopter descended toward the peak, rotors kicking up dirt and ash from their fire. A paramedic on a winch cable waved acknowledgement. They'd made it. Against mountain lions and tribal warriors, and exposure and infection and every impossible odd. They'd survived. Grayson pulled Sutton into a fierce embrace, both of them crying and laughing simultaneously. The winch cable lowered. A paramedic in a flight suit reached for them. 2 survivors, both ambulatory? Yes, Grayson confirmed. Harness fits 1 person. Need 2 trips. Sutton immediately stepped back. You first. Your leg. Together or not at all. Grayson, be practical. I'm not leaving you on this mountain. Rig the harness for both, or we wait. The paramedic hesitated, clearly against protocol. That's dangerous. Weight limits. We've survived impossible things together. We're leaving together. Sutton's eyes filled with tears. You stubborn, wonderful idiot. The paramedic rigged the harness carefully, strapping them together so tightly they could barely breathe. The cable began lifting. Grayson held Sutton as the ground fell away, as the mountain that had nearly killed them shrank below. She laughed against his shoulder. We made it. Because of you. All because of you. He kissed her as the helicopter pulled them skyward, and the whole impossible survival became real. The helicopter touched down at Seattle Medical Center's rooftop pad with a jolt that sent pain flaring through Grayson's leg. EMTs swarmed immediately, hands reaching to help them from the aircraft. But what stopped Grayson cold was the wall of cameras beyond the medical staff. 30 reporters minimum, maybe more. Lights flashing, microphones thrust forward like weapons. Mr. Blake, how did you survive 9 days in the wilderness? Sutton's hand tightened on his. They were still strapped together in the rescue harness, neither wanting to be the first to break contact. A paramedic tried steering them toward the emergency entrance. The press surged forward despite security attempts to hold them back. Grayson stopped, turned deliberately to face the cameras. Years of media training told him to deflect, minimize, protect the corporate image, say no comment, and disappear behind hospital doors. But 9 days had burned away that instinct. Sutton Hayes saved my life, multiple times. Without her intelligence, her courage, and her knowledge, I would be dead in those mountains. A reporter pushed closer. Is she your employee? The question hung loaded with implication. Office romance, impropriety, scandal. Old Grayson would have denied everything. Protected reputation above truth. New Grayson looked at Sutton, dirt-streaked, exhausted, beautiful, and chose honesty. Sutton is the most important person in my life. Camera flashes exploded. Sutton's eyes went wide with shock. Another reporter sensing blood. Are you two romantically involved? This was the cliff edge, the point of no return. Professional suicide, possibly. Grayson faced the cameras squarely. Yes, I love her. The media erupted into chaos. Questions overlapped into incomprehensible noise. Security finally managed to push them back, creating space for the EMTs to wheel 2 gurneys forward. But standing behind the press scrum, face dark with fury barely contained, was Victor Blake. Their eyes met across the chaos. Victor's expression promised consequences. Grayson looked away first, climbing onto the gurney. Sutton was lifted onto the second. They were separated by hospital protocol, different examination rooms, different doctors. The loss of contact after 9 days of constant proximity felt like amputation. A nurse was explaining something about IV fluids and infection protocol when the door to Grayson's examination room slammed open. Victor Blake stood in the doorway like judgment incarnate. Everyone out, now. The medical staff hesitated. Victor's voice dropped to a tone that had terrified boardrooms for decades. I said out. They fled. The door clicked shut. Victor's control shattered. Have you lost your mind? Uncle Victor, most important person? I love her? To the press? Stock dropped 12% in the 3 hours since those helicopters found you. Grayson met his uncle's fury with unexpected calm. I don't care about stock price. The silence that followed felt nuclear. Victor actually staggered backward. You don't care? That company is your father's legacy. No, that company was your ambition. Dad wanted me happy and whole, not successful and hollow. Victor's face flushed dangerous purple. Your father was weak, soft. He would have run that company into the ground with his feelings and ethics. I saved it. I saved you. White rage flooded through Grayson. Don't you dare call Dad weak. He was building you into another failure before he died. I fixed that, made you strong. You made me isolated. There's a difference. Victor changed tactics with predatory smoothness. Grayson, listen. Emergency board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Ice formed in Grayson's stomach. I have majority voting shares. They can't remove me without. I control 38% through various trusts. Find 13% more among nervous board members worried about your mental state, and you're finished as CEO. The threat was real. Victor had positioned himself carefully over the years, maintaining power through proxy. You wouldn't. Try me. Or, Victor leaned close, voice dropping, issue a statement. Survival trauma created temporary emotional attachment. Ms. Hayes and I maintain professional boundaries only. Stock rebounds. Everyone wins. Everyone except Sutton. She's nobody. A designer who got lucky surviving a crash. You think she's special? She's ordinary. Something inside Grayson snapped clean through. He stood, ripping the IV line from his arm. Blood dripped. He faced Victor directly. Get out. Grayson, be reasonable. For 25 years, you taught me that vulnerability meant failure. You were wrong. I made you successful and miserable. Sutton showed me the man I'm supposed to be underneath your conditioning. Victor's face hardened to granite. So you choose her over your father's company? I choose being human over being your weapon. For the first time in 25 years, I'm making my own choice. You'll regret this. Maybe, but it's mine to regret. Victor stared with pure hatred. You're not the man your father raised. Grayson's voice came quiet but certain. You're right. I'm better. And Dad would understand that. Victor turned and left without another word. The door closing behind him sounded like a coffin lid. Grayson sat heavily on the examination table. His hands shook. Had he just destroyed everything he'd built? Probably. Did he regret it? Not even slightly. The door opened again. Sutton stood there in a hospital gown, IV pole in hand, looking furious and worried simultaneously. I heard shouting through the wall. Grayson crossed to her in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. She came willingly, IV pole clattering aside. What happened? I chose you over the company. Sutton pulled back, eyes wide. Grayson, no, you can't sacrifice. It's done. Victor will rally the board. I'll likely lose CEO position, and I don't care. You should care. You built Blake Technologies from nothing. He cupped her face gently. I built an empire and forgot to build a life. You reminded me which one actually matters. If you lose everything because of me, I lose things. Material possessions. Not purpose, not myself, not you. Sutton's eyes filled with tears. You barely know me outside crisis situations. I know you ran into a mountain lion's den when you could have escaped. I know you worked impossible hours because excellence mattered to you, not approval from me. I know you're stronger than anyone I've met. He pulled the letter from his jacket pocket, somehow still there after everything. My father gave me this 2 years ago, told me to read it when I found someone worth fighting for. Grayson opened the envelope for the first time. His father's handwriting blurred as tears formed. Son, when you find someone worth fighting for, fight. Don't let my business lessons make you forget life lessons. The company matters, but people matter infinitely more. Love you always, Dad. Sutton read over his shoulder, her own tears falling freely. He knew. Your father understood. He always did. I just forgot for 25 years. They stood holding each other in the hospital room, medical equipment beeping around them, and Grayson felt more certain than he'd ever been in a boardroom. This was right. This was real. Everything else could burn. The board meeting convened at 9 sharp 3 days later. Grayson wore a borrowed suit that didn't fit quite right. His own clothes were still torn and blood-stained somewhere in evidence. 12 board members sat around the familiar walnut table. Victor occupied the head position, a presumption that would have seemed impossible a week ago. Sutton sat beside Grayson as his invited guest and advisor. She'd resigned from Blake Technologies formally the previous day, eliminating the ethics violation Victor wanted to exploit. Richard Hoffman looked apologetic but resigned. The others avoided eye contact entirely. Victor called the meeting to order with vicious efficiency. This emergency session addresses the fitness of our current CEO. I move to remove Grayson Blake from his position due to erratic behavior, poor judgment, and actions that have damaged company value and reputation. He clicked through a presentation, stock charts showing the 12% drop, news headlines about the love confession, investor statements expressing concern. Furthermore, I recommend psychological evaluation before Mr. Blake is allowed to resume any company responsibilities. Survival trauma clearly affected his judgment. The case was damning if you ignored context, which Victor did masterfully. Grayson stood. May I respond? Victor waved dismissively. Floor is yours, briefly. First, Sutton Hayes is no longer my subordinate. She resigned to eliminate any ethics concerns. She's here as an independent consultant I've hired personally. Sutton stood as well, professional despite the borrowed clothes. I'm advising Mr. Blake on strategic communications and stakeholder management. Smart framing, legal, clean. Second, stock dropped due to speculation, not fundamental business weakness. Q3 numbers remain strong. Revenue up 23%, profit margins highest in company history. Grayson projected his own slides. Solid data that contradicted Victor's emotional arguments. Third, my relationship doesn't impair business judgment. If anything, survival experience taught me better crisis management and priority assessment under pressure. Victor's smile turned predatory. Touching speech, but investor confidence is shattered. Has been restored. Grayson clicked to the next slide. Contract terms with Davidson Industries. $30 million. Largest deal in Blake Technologies history. Shocked silence filled the room. Closed this morning at 6 a.m. from my hospital bed. Davidson's CEO personally called to express admiration for authenticity and courage. He'd rather partner with a company led by someone human than someone pretending perfection. Richard Hoffman leaned forward, the first sign of interest. This is confirmed? Signed and executed. Legal has the paperwork. Sutton added quietly, the design work that secured this contract was created by me over 9 months. Mr. Blake is acknowledging that contribution publicly for the first time. Calculated honesty, showing growth and integrity simultaneously. Victor's face flushed dark. One contract doesn't prove. It proves that being real resonates more than being cold. That authentic leadership builds loyalty impossible to fake. Grayson faced the board directly. For 15 years, I followed a playbook of ruthlessness and isolation. It worked financially but failed humanly. I became someone my father wouldn't recognize. 9 days surviving wilderness taught me that real leadership requires courage to be vulnerable, strength to admit mistakes, wisdom to value people over quarterly returns. Vote me out if you choose, but understand you're choosing fear over evolution. The room held its breath. Richard Hoffman spoke first. I moved to table the removal motion indefinitely. Another board member quickly seconded. Vote called. 9-3 in favor of tabling. Grayson remained CEO. Victor stood so violently his chair crashed backward. This isn't finished. He stormed out without another word. Relief should have flooded through Grayson. Instead, unease settled. Victor didn't make empty threats. The IT security director found Grayson 2 hours later in his office. Sir, we detected unusual network access last night. Someone downloaded Aurora product files to an external server. Grayson's blood went cold. Source? IP address traces to Victor Blake's home network. Happened at 3 a.m. Corporate espionage. Victor was selling company secrets. Pull all access logs. Contact legal and FBI Corporate Crimes Division. Now. The evidence was overwhelming once they looked. Months of file transfers. Email communications with Nextech, their primary competitor. Negotiations for selling complete Aurora specifications in exchange for $5 million cash plus equity stake. Victor had been planning this betrayal long before the crash. Grayson stared at the proof on his screen. His uncle, the man who'd raised him after his parents died, who'd taught him everything about business. A traitor. Sutton's hand found his shoulder. Are you okay? He's family. He stopped being family when he tried destroying you for being human. The truth of it settled. Victor had never loved him, just molded him into a useful tool. Call the FBI. 2 days later, federal agents arrested Victor Blake at his waterfront home. Handcuffs, rights read, perp walk in front of cameras that had celebrated his business acumen for decades. Victor caught Grayson's eye as agents led him past Blake Technologies' lobby. I made you everything you are. Grayson's response came quiet but absolute. No, you made me successful. Sutton made me whole. Learn the difference. Victor was led away. Grayson felt nothing but sad relief. The trial took 3 weeks. Evidence was overwhelming. Email trails, bank records, file transfer logs, recorded conversations with Nextech executives. Jury deliberated 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Judge's sentence was harsh. 5 years federal prison, $10 million fine, lifetime ban from serving as corporate officer. Justice served through proper legal channels. Traditional values upheld. Grayson attended sentencing but didn't testify. Victor had destroyed himself through his own choices. Walking out of the courthouse, Sutton took his hand. "How do you feel?" "Like closing a chapter I should have finished years ago." "What's next?" Grayson smiled, genuine, unguarded. "Building something new, together." 6 months passed like accelerated evolution. Blake Technologies thrived under Grayson's reformed leadership. He promoted talent regardless of politics, instituted profit sharing for all employees, created flexible work culture that valued results over FaceTime. Stock price climbed to record highs. Employee retention hit 97%. Industry publications ran features. How vulnerability became Blake Technologies' secret weapon. But the real change was personal. Grayson sold the sterile penthouse. He and Sutton bought a modest house in Fremont, 3 bedrooms, actual backyard, neighbors who borrowed tools. They decorated together. Photos went up on walls. Sutton's grandmother, Grayson's father, the rescue helicopter shot that had made national news. Friday nights meant hosting friends for dinner. Sarah from the design team, Richard Hoffman, people who knew them as Grayson and Sutton, not CEO and designer. Laughter filled rooms that had been silent too long. At work, boundaries remained professional. Sutton had accepted Chief Design Officer position, first female C-suite executive in company history. She earned the role through merit, and everyone knew it. But in meetings, when they disagreed about strategy or aesthetics, the debate was respectful challenge between minds that valued each other. "The color palette feels off-brand," Grayson said during one design review. Sutton pulled up her reasoning. "It's intentionally edging outside comfort zone. Brand evolution requires calculated risks." Old Grayson would have overruled her. New Grayson actually listened. "Walk me through the consumer psychology." She did, thoroughly, convincingly. "You're right, I'm wrong. Proceed with your vision." The design team looked shocked. Sutton smiled. "Look at you, learning to trust. Best education I ever received." They flew to Montana one weekend. Grayson wanted Sutton to meet Jack properly, not just via phone calls. The ranch sat in a valley between mountain peaks, exactly as Grayson remembered. Jack stood on the porch, older, grayer, but with the same warm smile. He pulled Grayson into a bear hug that cracked ribs. "Let me look at you." Jack held him at arm's length. "You're different, better. I found my way back." "I can see that." Jack turned to Sutton, extending his hand. "You must be the woman who saved my boy's life." Sutton shook firmly. "He saved mine too." Fair exchange. "Somehow I doubt that. Come inside. I want to hear everything." They spent 3 days hiking trails Grayson had explored as a teenager. Sutton charmed Jack with her plant knowledge. They cooked together, cleaned up together, sat on the porch watching sunset paint the Rockies gold. On the final evening, Jack pulled Grayson aside. "Your father would be proud, not of the company, though that's impressive. Proud of who you've become. I lost my way for a long time. Most of us do. The brave ones find their way back." Jack's eyes went to Sutton, who was sketching the mountain view. "She's special. Don't let her go." "I won't. I'm going to ask her to marry me." Jack's face split in a huge grin. "About damn time. Your father's wedding ring is in the safe. Been waiting for you to be ready." The platinum band felt heavy with history and hope. Grayson planned carefully. Not a grand gesture, Sutton would hate that. Something meaningful, private. He chartered a helicopter to the Cascade Mountains. Not the crash site, too traumatic, but near where they'd built the signal fire. The pilot set down on the summit at sunset. Grayson helped Sutton out, her eyes wide with confusion. "Why are we here?" "You'll see." They hiked to the overlook. The valley spread below, endless forest painted in amber light. Grayson knelt. Sutton's hands flew to her mouth. "6 months ago, I was dying inside success. Then a plane fell from the sky carrying two people who thought they hated each other." He pulled out the ring box. "You taught me that life is measured in connections, not acquisitions. That vulnerability takes more courage than control. That love is worth any risk. I can't promise empire anymore. I step back from daily CEO duties to focus on what matters. But I promise partnership, honesty, adventures, a life built together on equal ground." "Sutton Hayes, will you marry me?" She dropped to her knees opposite him, tears streaming. "You stubborn, wonderful, completely reformed man. Yes, absolutely yes." He slid the ring onto her finger. His father's ring, sized perfectly for her hand. They kissed as the sun set, and Grayson felt complete for the first time since childhood. "I have one condition," Sutton said when they broke apart. "Anything. We elope, small ceremony, no media circus." Grayson laughed. "Perfect, absolutely perfect. And one more thing." She pulled out a business proposal from her jacket. "I want us to start a company together. 50-50 ownership." His heart soared. "Tell me more." "Sustainable outdoor gear using your survival knowledge and my design expertise. Hayes and Blake Outfitters. Equipment that actually works because we field tested it the hard way. You want to leave Blake Technologies completely? I want to build something that's ours, from nothing, together." Grayson pulled her close. "Best proposal I've ever received. Yes, absolutely yes." They sealed both commitments, engagement and business partnership, with a kiss that promised everything. 1 year later, Seattle Courthouse. Friday afternoon rain streaking the windows. Grayson wore his father's watch and a simple navy suit. Sutton wore ivory, her mother crying happy tears in the front row. Richard Hoffman served as witness. The judge was efficient and kind. Vows were simple but absolute. "I promise to stay human, to protect without controlling, to listen before deciding, to love you through every adventure. I promise to challenge you when needed, to remind you who you are when you forget, to build our life as true equals, to love you always." Rings exchanged, kiss sealed, married. They walked out into Seattle rain, appropriately dramatic, and Grayson had never felt lighter. Hayes and Blake Outfitters occupied a small office in Ballard. 12 employees. Sustainable materials sourced ethically. Products designed by people who'd actually survived wilderness. First-year revenue, $4.2 million. Small compared to Blake Technologies, but entirely theirs. Outside Magazine featured them. Survival story becomes business success. The article quoted Sutton. "We learned that the best products come from real experience. Everything we make, we've tested under conditions that tried to kill us. That authenticity resonates." Grayson still consulted for Blake Technologies part-time. Leadership had smoothly transitioned to internal promotion. Someone younger, hungrier, but with values Grayson had finally learned. The company thrived without him. That felt like success rather than failure. Weekends, Grayson taught wilderness survival classes. Corporate executives learning to make fire without matches. Teenagers discovering confidence through challenge. "Survival skills aren't about conquering nature," he told each new group. "They're about understanding yourself under pressure." Sutton taught design workshops for underprivileged youth. Art as empowerment. Creativity as resilience. They gave back what the mountains had given them. On their first anniversary, they visited Captain Morrison's grave together. Veterans Cemetery, Seattle. Fresh flowers placed on the simple military marker. "His final flight gave us everything," Sutton whispered. Grayson touched the stone gently. "We won't waste the gift." They drove home as evening fell. The house in Fremont glowed with warm light. Inside, Grayson found the cocktail napkin they'd saved from the hospital. Both their signatures from that first day of recovery. He framed it carefully, hung it above their shared desk. Physical reminder of promises kept. That night, they sat on their back porch. Sutton's hand moved to her stomach. 6 months pregnant, barely showing. They hadn't told many people yet. Private joy before public knowledge. "Think we'll be good parents?" she asked. Grayson's hand covered hers. "We survived impossible things. We can handle one tiny human." Terrifying logic. "Welcome to our life." She laughed. The sound filled their small backyard, echoing off into Seattle darkness. A distant siren wailed. City sounds that once meant nothing now meant home. "What do we teach them?" Sutton asked quietly. "Everything. Survival and art. Numbers and nature. How to build things that last and when to let things go. Balance." Exactly. Above them, stars appeared through breaking clouds. The same stars that had witnessed their survival. The same sky that had watched them transform. Grayson pulled Sutton closer. She fit against him perfectly, the way she had that first terrible night when they'd held each other against the cold. "Best decision I ever made," he said. "Which one?" "Getting on that plane, crashing in those mountains, choosing you over everything else. All of it." Sutton tilted her face up. "You know what's funny? I spent 3 years thinking you were incapable of feeling. Turns out you feel everything. You just needed permission to show it. You gave me that permission. You gave it to yourself. I just witnessed the transformation." They sat in comfortable silence as full darkness fell. The city glowed around them, Seattle alive and thriving, indifferent to their small miracle. But in their backyard, in their life they'd built from wreckage, the miracle was everything. Grayson Blake had traded empire for partnership, control for trust, success for fulfillment, the best deal he'd ever negotiated. And sitting there with Sutton in his arms, their child growing between them, home built on honesty rather than image, he finally understood what his father had tried to teach him. Life wasn't measured in quarterly returns or stock prices or corner offices. It was measured in moments like this. Quiet, real, completely sufficient. The mountains had stripped everything away until only truth remained. And the truth was simple. He'd found what mattered. Everything else was just noise.